I would say that my most important piece of advice, if I could really turn back the hands of time, it would be to really narrow down your tool stack. Use something, use the best in breed, but use one tool for everything. The more that you adopt, really, the more challenge it creates for you.
Welcome to Greater Than the Sum, the series where we demystify what it takes for small business owners in Canada and the accountants that support them to get control of their finances. I'm your host, Mark Cassini, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Pluto. Pluto is an all-in-one payment automation platform that automates your payable and receivable workflows. If you're a small business owner in Canada who's ready to take control of your finances, or an accountant looking to spend less time on manual tasks and more time as an advisor, then you're in the right place. Join me as we uncover the secret to making your business greater than the sum of its parts. Hey, Omar, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
Excited to have you here. Let's get right into it then. Let's start with some easy ones. What's your name, your role, and where do you work?
My name is Omar Visram. I am the co-founder and CEO of Enkel. We are a Vancouver-based accounting services provider with a global team of about 80 people.
Fantastic. And what would you say is the mission of Enkel?
The mission of Enkel is to be the most trusted accounting service provider in Canada. We have about 300 clients today, and we're on a mission to grow that significantly in the coming years.
And what would you say is the why behind what you do? What motivates you?
What motivates me is helping leaders. I grew up in a family of small businesses and really saw firsthand the struggles that small business owners face. And so when I decided to go into business, my goal was to do something that really helped leaders, helped business owners succeed. And so after becoming an accountant in my younger years, I launched Enkel, and here we are.
Love that. And what advice would you give to your past self before opening your own business?
There's a couple of things. So I am very optimistic, perhaps overly optimistic. So one piece of advice that I would give myself is be realistic. It will be hard. There will be bad days. And secondly, you need to enjoy the journey. You really need to enjoy what you're doing every single day and take measures that allow you to do that. You have to live a life. You're building a business over the long term, and make sure that you take care of yourself. In doing so, you'll be able to take care of all of the people that are depending on you.
That's some great advice. And of course, I think sometimes you need a little bit of optimism to persevere through the tough days, right?
Of course, yes.
And what would you say people misunderstand most about the challenges you're trying to solve?
I think the biggest challenge that I encounter is really the oversimplification of what we do. On the surface, what we do is it's pretty easy to explain. It's accounting services, bookkeeping, payroll, AP. But what people don't understand is the complexity of what goes into building a great solution and really delivering a service that exceeds expectations. There's a lot of process. There's a lot of tools that go into what we do. There's a lot of really finite details that go into building out our processes. And often that is misunderstood.
Yeah, I think on the surface, when you hear terms like accounting, bookkeeping, payroll, AP, they're very short, easy to understand words. But like you said, it's almost like the iceberg, where at the tip, it seems very straightforward, but underneath the line of the water, there's a lot of activity and complexity and nuance that people oftentimes struggle to appreciate unless you're seeing it firsthand like you do.
Absolutely.
Let's transition ever so slightly and dive a bit deeper into the world of financial health for SMBs. And on that note, at Enkel, you provide bookkeeping services for hundreds of SMBs throughout Canada, specializing specifically in nonprofits. Can you describe some of the unique challenges you face across payment operations when working with these NPO clients and how they impacted your business operations and the ability to keep clients satisfied?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest challenges that NPOs face is approvals. Approvals are important in a not-for-profit context. There's usually an approval by the person making the expenditure. There are approvals that then have to go to the board level. There's governance. Governance exists for a reason in these organizations. But that makes the payment operations of not-for-profit organizations inherently more complex. I remember early on in my days at Enkel, and I was speaking to an accountant friend of mine, and he said, we drive checks around town. So the executive director prepares them, the operations coordinator drives them to the treasurer who signs off on them. And I thought there has to be a better way of doing things.
Yeah, I love that example. It's one that I've heard, from even some small business owners or people who work at small businesses in my own family, where, the pains of having to be in a physical location to sign checks and then to have to actually manually distribute them, and how much time and effort and really, money goes into something as simple as checks.
Right.
Can really eat away at, the people's time who are trying to do more strategic and important work.
Yeah, that's right.
And what would you say was the turning point when you decided that the existing processes were no longer sustainable to meet the demands of your clients and help them take control of their cash? Can you talk about a few examples of what was happening that made you realize that change was necessary?
Seeing a not-for-profit organization struggle with approvals, that was one turning point for us, and a place where we really started thinking that we needed a solution better than, driving checks around town or allowing our clients to drive checks around town. But the other was cash flow, right? Looking at our clients, the inability to understand what's in the bank, what's coming in, what's going out. We knew we needed a better workflow. And so in implementing a tool that allows us to batch payments and to control approvals, that became really important, I would say, quite early on in our journey. There's sort of a secondary turning point to this. We started using Pluto early days, but then we continued to use other platforms. And what we found is we just had inconsistent processes, client to client. Approval processes were different. And this was leading to inefficiency on our side and also not the best result for our clients. And so the second turning point was really when we went all in on Pluto. And Pluto became really the only payment tool that we supported. So we got all of our clients off of what they were using if it was not Pluto and onto Pluto, so that we could have one consistent workflow and process.
Yeah, and think back to the time before you decided to adopt Pluto or even another tool. What would it have cost your business in terms of time and money to not change anything and keep with the status quo?
Yeah, so if we'd kept with the status quo, things would have been okay, I guess. But we did see a significant reduction in the amount of time that we spent on dealing with AP as a service. In fact, we've quantified that to be about a 30% savings.
I love that. As a good business owner and accountant, you're able to quantify the actual impact. When small businesses or accounting firms or NPOs are looking to adopt a new solution, it's easy to get hung up on the cost and just look at the number and say, wow, this could be expensive in the long term. But if you're not able to see past that and look at what the actual savings from spending a little bit of money up front could be in the long term, it can really stop you from taking that next step. And whether it's realizing efficiencies in processes or unlocking additional growth by freeing up time to take on new clients, that's kind of the vision you have to adopt. And what were some of the points that you were looking for when evaluating a new solution? What technology, process, or other change would help solve the challenges your customers experienced across payment operations?
Yeah, so let me just back up a little bit. The way that we see ourselves is we are a tech-enabled accounting services provider. So service is at our core. What we do is, a service that we're delivering. But the technology that allows us to do that better is really critical. And so we were looking for a tool that effectively automated what we were doing in a manual way, right? Instead of emailing out approvals, could we get them done in an automated fashion? And so that was really important to us. I'd say secondarily, just because we're a services business and we strive to meet the needs of small to mid-sized business owners and not-for-profit organization leaders, one thing that was really critical was a responsive service desk, ultimately. And so when we were evaluating, who we would partner with, that was a really critical element. And ultimately, the support at Pluto has been an absolute game changer.
Love to hear that. And you're absolutely right. Obviously, when you're evaluating a solution or you're buying a tool to help support the business or your client's business, obviously there's the features that are going to come with that tool, right? And there's going to be the day-to-day usage of the tool. But it's important to also consider, as you said, the people behind the tool, right?
Yeah.
What is the team made up of? How are they going to be able to support you if you run into questions or issues, or maybe the client doesn't fully grasp the proper way to use the tool, or maybe someone internally is being onboarded and they're struggling with learning the tool. So I appreciate you highlighting that, because that is something that can oftentimes make or break a solution being fully adopted and utilized by either the team using it or the clients you're trying to use it for.
Absolutely.
And what long-term benefits have you observed since implementing the solution, and how has it changed how you manage your bookkeeping services for SMBs and NPOs?
So just being more and more invested in the workflow has allowed us to build out, I'd say, a really clear process, which allows us to onboard new employees really fast. We have one accepted way of delivering our AP service. Everybody understands that in the organization, and that leads to much better quality for the end client. It has allowed us to bring some best practices to our clients. When we're going through the onboarding process, as an example, we now prompt clients, should you have an approver, who would those approvers be, right? So it's made us focus a little bit more on governance and helping our clients implement better processes and better controls so that their businesses can improve.
I think that's great, because it highlights how these tools and solutions can almost act as a forcing function to not only make you, as the company using the tool, reevaluate your own processes and workflows, or maybe even identify areas of those workflows and processes that you hadn't considered before, but also for your clients as well. So I appreciate you highlighting that, because that is something that sometimes those solutions can unlock that you wouldn't have otherwise expected them to.
Absolutely.
But I want to transition ever so slightly into this idea of financial wins and sometimes failures as well, right? And in business, those are two things that are kind of inescapable. There's going to be moments where you're doing really well, and there's going to be moments where things are going not so well. So I'd love to spend some time digging a bit deeper there. If you could reflect on your experience with Enkel, what is one of the most common financial mistakes you see nonprofits make when it comes to bookkeeping, and how accountants can help them avoid it?
Often I see this before we start working with not-for-profit organizations, when we're having a discussion about engaging with a not-for-profit organization. Many organizations and leaders in these organizations don't understand their numbers. In a not-for-profit context, it's not just about looking at the bank account. Really, that can be very misleading. You can have just received a significant amount of funding, but that funding may be restricted. So we've seen many situations where not-for-profit organizations are, they appear to be flush with cash, but they actually have some significant financial and cash issues because that funding has to be used for a specific purpose. And what we often find is that it's really operations, cash needed for operations that is limited and can cause significant strain on the organization.
And in your experience working with NPOs, have you found that, because they're often so oriented around the work that they're doing and the good that they're doing for the various partners that they're working with, that you sometimes have to reorient them around those financials and have those conversations maybe even a bit more regularly around the financial health of the organization?
Absolutely. So we really believe that all not-for-profit organizations need to see monthly financial statements. And these are not just financial statements that are completed on a cash basis. These are financial statements that are on an accruals basis using the financial reporting framework that is applied for the year-end financial statements, because you really need to understand what your revenue looks like, what your expenses look like, so that you can see where you are relative to budget, how much you have left on a specific program budget, how operations are performing. All of those matters are so critical. You need to be looking at them on a monthly basis.
So on this idea of staying on top of things and making sure that you have a good line of sight to the financials of the NPO and how things are performing, I'm wondering if you could share a significant financial win from one of your clients that highlights the impact of adopting new accounting technologies. Specifically, I think we'd love to hear your thoughts on how combining new technologies and experienced professionals leads to more efficiency, cash control, and growth?
Yeah, this is a really great question. And often what we do, doesn't get measured, right? We have one client in particular. It's a small not-for-profit organization in Toronto called Point A. And what I love about these guys is they really measure everything. It's really in line with the type of work that they do. And what the executive director has informed me is that our service has saved them $13,000 a year. So just the cost of how they were, doing their accounting before, which was effectively an in-house solution. When they brought us in, it led to a $13,000 savings. They also found that their workload decreased by 64%. And so those are pretty powerful numbers when you think about this is a small not-for-profit organization with really only a handful of employees, right? What isn't included in that number is that the outcome ultimately improved, right? The client is getting better data. Financial statements are completed faster. Just completed a year-end audit with no adjusting journal entries. So many additional wins in addition to the hard numbers or the savings, if you will.
And are you able to point to any specific technologies or solutions that maybe even you or the client specifically called out in that example that helped unlock that savings? Or was it more just the general kind of services and approach that your team provides?
Yeah, so ultimately what led to that outcome is the combination of our technology and our service, but our service offering, our technology stack is very standard, right? And Pluto, of course, is at the forefront of that on the payment side. We also use other tools like Dext, Payworks, and such. But all of those together, along with our service, is what resulted in that outcome.
That's great. And from your perspective, what role does technology play in modern bookkeeping and cash management? And how can small businesses leverage it to their advantage?
So, accounting technology is really, I think, a starting point today. If you're not using the latest and greatest, you are lagging behind. But when you're on these platforms, what these platforms allow you to do is to get quicker access to your data. They also allow you to work in a more flexible way from anywhere. And very importantly, they allow you to collaborate with service providers in a much more effective way. Just a decade ago, it wasn't uncommon to be sending backups to your accountant. Like, can you even imagine? Today, we just all log into the same file and we're looking at the same source of truth.
I'm curious, based on your experience working in the industry for as long as you have, what has even something as simple as the example that you've outlined in terms of no longer having to provide a backup to your accounting team? How has that changed how the relationship between SMBs and clients, or NPOs even as clients and their accounting partners changed?
I think what it's leading to is ultimately better quality outcomes for the end client, right? Clients are able to get, putting it bluntly, better, faster, cheaper results, right? So reporting, not on demand because things aren't done in real time, but reporting that is much quicker, better quality because there's, greater transparency, greater access to information and data flow between the service provider and the client. And ultimately cheaper because it does, these tools do allow us to drive down the cost of our service. As we automate, the cost of delivering a service decreases and that is passed on to the client.
Of course. And on the flip side, what are some of the things that maybe pitfalls, let's say, that those solutions and that improved relationship between the client and the accounting firm has helped those clients avoid? Are there any kind of, maybe not horror stories, let's say, but are there any, issues or less desirable outcomes that, maybe you would have experienced 5, 10, 20 years ago that are now almost completely gone because of this adoption of technology and the improved relationship between accounting partner and client?
I would say approvals is one, right? Approvals being manual previously, approvals could get missed, cash could be released before it should. Really, that just doesn't happen anymore, right? And also, I would say, transparency, really, where are my books? Where are things? And there can still be some, challenge here, but we're all looking at one source of truth, right? Everybody has access to the same data set. And so that decreases some of that questioning around, what have you done for me? Where are things?
And looking back, what is one piece of advice you would give to bookkeepers and accountants who are struggling to help their small business clients manage finances effectively?
My most important piece of advice, if I could really turn back the hands of time, it would be to really narrow down your tool stack. Use the best in breed, but use one tool for everything. The more that you adopt, really, the more challenge it creates for you. And really, that impacts your customer in a negative way. So there is always the pain of trying to confidently convince a client that they need to adopt your tool stack. But that pain that you will bear up front will far, far benefit you over the long term. It'll benefit you and it'll benefit your client.
I think that's some great advice. And is there one particular part of the stack that you feel accountants and bookkeepers should consider, evaluating first and then going on from there? Or is it really dependent on the needs of the clients or even the firm itself?
I'd say it would depend on the firm a little bit. A lot of firms nowadays are really focusing on specific verticals. So figure that part out first. Who do you serve? And then, figure out really the best in breed tools to solve for that client group.
I want to transition into the rapid fire portion of our conversation around the idea of payment support. So what question do you wish more small businesses would ask themselves about their AR AP processes?
So AR, are we collecting cash fast enough? And AP, do we really understand our expenses and how we can reduce them?
And what are your 3 top tips in ensuring data accuracy and consistency across different bookkeeping processes?
Yeah, this is an easy one. So again, it's back to my one platform. Use one platform for everything, know it cold, and train your team. Invest heavily in that training and make sure everybody's an expert on that tool.
And what are your top 3 tips for automating repetitive bookkeeping tasks?
Really look for tools with OCR, AI capabilities. That is a game changer. And also, a lot of tools today leverage rules. Use the ability to upload rules, to create rules for specific transactions. You will dramatically improve the quality of your bookkeeping, and you will decrease the time that anybody needs to spend on bookkeeping.
What is the biggest challenge you faced with accounts payable, and how did you overcome it?
The biggest challenge we faced with accounts payable was really a lack of clear process and sign off with the client, really not understanding when things needed to be paid, how to pay them, what the payment method was, and what the client's expectations were in terms of payment dates. And so having one clear, consistent process, one way of doing things really helped us improve that.
And you mentioned this earlier in one of your previous answers around OCR, but just to dive a bit deeper, what role do you see AI play in bookkeeping over the next 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, so I think AI is just going to help us really take our processes further from an automation standpoint. So it will be taking more tasks that we have, automating them, improving the quality of them. There are a number of really exciting tools out there that should enable our bookkeeping to improve dramatically. That's where I see really the huge win in the next 12 to 18 months.
Right on. And lastly, what advice would you give to a nonprofit starting to explore digesting its finances?
I would say that really focus on one, implementing a fantastic tool stack that helps you automate your processes and drive down the amount of time that you're spending on those processes.
Right on. Well, Omar, you survived the rapid fire portion of our conversation. Let's transition to our last segment. I'll start here. If you could offer one piece of advice to aspiring entrepreneurs or small business owners in the bookkeeping and accounting sectors, what would it be?
I would say start small. So find your first 10 clients, get those 10 clients operating really well, have very clear operating procedures, the right tool stack, and grow from there.
And is there a particular book, podcast, or resource that has influenced your approach to business and financial management?
There was one that I read early on that really I found quite interesting. I would say it's less relevant for me today, but the Successful Bookkeeper podcast, that has been a great source of ideas, I would say. Another one that I really loved, and I listened to this early on, was a podcast. It's called How I Built This. And the entrepreneur being interviewed was Brian Scudamore of OE2 Brands. And it's just a really real, raw view of the challenges that you face in growing a business, but specifically a services business.
What are 2 to 3 things you wish clients knew or did differently to make everyone's life a little easier?
What we really struggle with to this day is just not getting documents on time so that we can start the bookkeeping process. That is a big challenge. And then a secondary one would be just not getting the approvals, not getting payment approvals, for instance, not getting approvals on transaction coding. Those challenges, really ultimately a lack of response from clients, that really holds down the whole process and makes it hard for us to really deliver a successful end product to our clients.
And as a follow-on, how have you worked with clients to address some of those challenges? Are there any tactics, conversations that you've had to have or that you've leveraged to make that responsiveness improve over time?
Yeah, so a lot of education. We have a client success team really that just focuses to obtain documents on time so that our bookkeeping team has what they need to start the bookkeeping process on time. I would say that this has become in our sales process a non-negotiable. We actually charge extra if you don't deliver your documents on time. And of course, there's a grace period. We understand that life happens. We're here to support our clients and work with them through, the good and the bad times. But ultimately, if we don't get what we need, and it's just a lack of response, there are additional costs associated with that behavior. And so what has happened, we've created this concept that we call Backlog Zero. And basically, if you are paying us for a set of financial statements in the month, you better be getting those financial statements, or it creates a chain reaction internally and gets escalated. And we, have some really tough conversations with our clients.
Yeah, I love that idea of setting it up as a non-negotiable from day one, even before the relationship starts, because you want to make sure that everyone is aware what the expectations are and that everyone's being held accountable. And like you said, it works both ways, right? If your clients are expecting you to deliver financial statements on time as expected, that expectation needs to be, held up on the other side of the bargain as well.
Absolutely.
If you could automate one other part of your life, inside or outside of work, what would it be?
It would be anything that is remotely admin related. I would automate absolutely everything related to administration. And I've tried this in various shapes and forms. But yeah, to the extent that I could just automate, every single invoice that has to be created for the business. I mean, most of it is automated, let's face it, but there are those like 20 or 30 every month that I have to look at, right? That is what I would do. I would solve that problem so that I could really focus on the things that I love.
And were there any things that, let's say, would have fallen into this category 2, 3, even, 5 years ago that you've now been able to successfully automate fully?
It's a really great question. One really great one is expense approvals and accounting internally. I mean, I was not a trained bookkeeper when I started the business. And so I was actually, I'd say, quite inefficient at doing my own bookkeeping. And of course, as I adopted all of these tools for the business, I implemented them. And now our bookkeeping is, it's really on autopilot.
That's great. And if people want to learn more about you and Enkel, where can they go to do that?
Yeah, follow me on LinkedIn. I tend to post a lot about my journey as an entrepreneur and as a founder and CEO of Enkel. You can also learn more about us through our website. We have a lot of content there about our story, how we got to be, or how we came to be, rather.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Omar. I really enjoyed the conversation. I know I learned a ton about how accountants and bookkeepers can implement new software and solutions to make not only their own lives, but the lives of their clients better. And I know there are a lot of really helpful tidbits about just running your own business that I'm sure our listeners will walk away with. So thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed it.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark.
That's all for today's episode of Greater Than the Sum. I hope you all got some great takeaways from our guest. Remember, taking control of your finances is within reach, and it's not as complicated as it seems. If you liked this episode, please consider subscribing and leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform. You can check out more about Pluto on Pluto.com for resources, tips, and advice on how to get control over your cash flow. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like to discuss, let us know on LinkedIn, Instagram, or X. See you next time.